Hello, my wonderful viewers, and welcome to part 2 of our essay on the Redneck bio-aliens and what they say about Din Djarin's personal journey, its mirror with Anakin's journey, and what that tells us about the Jedi and the Mandalorian codes and how they might be able to work together to fix a problem that Star Wars has had from the beginning. Here we go. It seems in this moment that Din Djarin has far exceeded Anakin Skywalker in their mirror life journeys. Din has in that moment rejected the outer trapping of the code, the traditions and personal rank, and has opted to obey the divine love that lives behind the code, and that the code was ultimately only there to make accessible to him. It seems in that moment that Din has completed the fix-it fix. However, the episode does move on past that moment, and Din puts his helmet back on, possibly attempting to reclaim the outer trappings that he tossed off. Of course, now we have seen the final episode, and we see that Din is not clinging to the outer trappings of the code that was. In the final moment, when it comes time to his choice to either show compassion to Baby Yoda and show his face to the world, Baby Grogu, he chooses to show compassion to his foundling, to make that final sacrifice of completely getting rid of all of the trappings of his old code and taking off of his helmet in front of people that he can't kill or silence, just so that his foundling can have the assurance of his love by seeing his face, and that they can share that moment before Luke takes the foundling off. Now, this is such a fascinating bundle of completion of story and contradiction, because Din, in that moment, he gives in to the Jedi code, which says to separate children from their families. But Din only does it because he is showing the ultimate self-sacrificing agape love for his son. He believes that this is what is best for Baby Yoda. But we as the audience all know how Luke's school is going to end. And even in Legends, Luke's Jedi school wasn't exactly the safest place to be. And in the new timeline, it's a terrible place to be. But all that aside, the point being that Din, on his own part, has completed the fix-it fix on the Mandalorian side of the code. But even though Anakin is long dead, Luke has taken up Anakin's story and is representing the Jedi code with all of its flaws and issues. So, Din has ultimately rejected the limitations of the Mandalorian code. He has moved beyond it. He has stepped beyond the old Mandalorian code that he clung to, clinging to the higher law of divine love, of compassion, of agape. And Luke, having taken up his father's mantle with all of those in that last episode, you see all of those odd parallels, because the creators reframe the corridor sequence from the Rogue One movie. And so Luke is definitely taking the place of Anakin here to maintain that mirror to Din's journey. And so Din, out of his pure love for Baby Yoda, and it makes a completely selfless mood, breaks the last remaining trappings of his Mandalorian code, while still staying true to the heart of them and spirit of the Mandalorian code. But unlike Anakin, who was unable to throw off those trappings until he broke entirely, Din throws off the trappings and emerges whole with his own internal moral code intact. We'll get back to the Jedi side of that later. But then you have what we started this on. Remember, I told you eventually we were going to get to the Redneck Bayou Insurgents, and this is where they come in and make me very, very worried for the soul of our beloved Mandalorian. Anakin's fall was marked by the murder of innocents in the effort to protect Padme and his children. Now, the Redneck Bayou insurgents were a far cry from the Temple younglings. They were actively attacking, and Din really had no chance to stop and explain the situation to them. There was nothing Din, in that moment, in that situation, could have done to avoid their deaths. But Din did just murder a lot of folks whose only crime was trying to stand up to the Empire. See, Din very loudly and notably calls them pirates, but they were not pirates. Pirates have worn many faces over the millennia, from the sea people who swept into the Mediterranean and ushered in the Bronze Age collapse half a millennia before the rise of ancient Greece, to the digital nomads who hack copies of books and sell them on black markets of the internet. A pirate has been and isn't defined by only one thing: being a thief. A pirate doesn't want to kill you. They don't want to destroy your stuff. Those things might very well happen during their piratical adventures, but that is never the goal. They want what you have. What makes them pirates is their organization and methods, but ultimately they are thieves. Those Redneck Bayou insurgents clearly had no intentions of stealing anything from the Juggernauts. Those lightweight speeder fan boats that they were flying on had no way to carry anything, even if they could lift it. They could not have hauled away a single canister of the stuff. They were only there to prevent the Empire from using that explosive. They were insurgents. In fact, they were rebels. They're the guys we have been rooting for the hardest from the moment the very first screen call of yellow-orange letters crept across a theater screen in the mid-70s. And Din just straight up murders them. This would be the equivalent of the deaths at the hand of General Skywalker during the Clone Wars. The show moves on way too quickly for us to dwell on this, however. The Empire rescues the Juggernaut, and we get our spirits lifted and our emotions tweaked by the cheering welcome that Din and Burr get when they drive the Juggernaut safely into the compound. It is only much, much later in this episode that we discover that these insurgents have been successfully keeping the Empire from completing the preparations for a vicious terrorist assault, presumably on the New Republic. In that moment, the episode doesn't let us dwell on it, and Burr saves the day by destroying the shipment of the explosive that he and Din brought in, and by crippling the Empire's capacity to process more, meaning that even the insurgents themselves might have accepted the loss of a few of their lives to achieve the goal that they were not able to achieve. So even the insurgents that Din killed might have kind of been okay with it in the end. But this raises some very tough questions. Our beloved man who just killed a bunch of rebels who were risking their lives to protect the rest of the galaxy from the Empire. Granted, Din didn't know that at the time, but would his actions have been different if he had known? He was willing to cast off the trappings of his code for baby Grogu. Exactly how far would he be willing to go for his foundling? Underneath the excitement of the episode, it looks like the writers have brought Din's story back in alignment with Anakin's. There is one person that Din loves who is in danger, and Din is willing to do anything to protect that person. Din now finds himself in the same position that Anakin did just before Anakin's fall to Darth Vader. Now, so far, Din has been making far better choices than Anakin's. There is a reason I call the show a canon fix-it fic. However, Din did break his code, then accept the trappings of his code back on to cover his open defiance, just like Anakin did. However, Din has already rectified that. However, Din still has a chance to make better final choices than Anakin. And I can see it all going to one of two ways, which are not going to happen this season, but could very well happen next season. The writers might chicken out and not bring this up again. Din might meet Baby Grogu afterwards and quietly hand off his armor to the armorer with an explanation, and then just move on with the Book of Boba and have rollicking good adventures on Tatooine. That would be a cheap way out from the creator's perspective, the coward's way out almost, and while Favreau and Filoni might be many things, I doubt they are cowards. The only other way is to follow up on these hints and to force Din to face a choice. Now, classically it goes like this. The hero is faced with his attachment, his lover, his child, his object of focus, and a greater good. Now, not some obscure greater good, like the Goblin's Chance 2 and the Hot Fuzz, but a real and material one. For example, in a recent procedural I watched, a man was faced with the option of losing access to a medicine that he was certain would cure his wife and the life of another man. In this procedural, the man murders the other man in order to keep his access to the medicine. This is choosing the attachment, his possessive love of his wife, to the greater good, the life of the man right in front of him. In this case, his wife found out in horror and informed him that her life was not to be purchased at that price. In the same way, given how the show was set up, Din's character so far, the most satisfying conclusion to his arc would be for him to be faced with a situation where there is a life in front of him, like the New Republic officer from the prison ship, or the rebels from the mining world. He would see an easy out to save baby Grogu. Kill this innocent person, complete his mission. He would be faced with the same choice as Anakin in front of the younglings. Now, this would be very, very artful on the writer's part. Baby Grogu was traumatized by a desperate father doing what he thought he needed to do to save his wife and child. Now, Din would be faced with the same situation. If Din makes the same choice as Anakin, he goes to baby Grogu with innocent blood tarnishing his shiny Beskar armor, the armor he no longer has a right to wear according to the code he cast off, if he's still wearing his armor. However, this is a fix-it fic, not a tragedy. So the proper story arc to follow would be Din Djarin just stopping. Din Djarin realizing that there is a bridge that he cannot cross no matter what the price is. Even if that price is baby Grogu's life. That Din has to face an action that is forbidden by the greatest love, even if it would temporarily reunite him with baby Grogu. The best example of this in literature is the story of Gollum and Bilbo and Frodo. Bilbo and Frodo both act with compassion towards Gollum, and both of them get happy ending because of it. Bilbo protects himself from the corruption of the One Ring by not beginning his ownership of it with Gollum's blood on his hands, and Frodo is saved from the ring's possession, as is the world, because Gollum was still there to rip it off his finger and fall into the magma. This is how the massive world-changing wars of Middle-earth were ultimately decided, by a small act of compassion. How this would play out in a Disney property, because they couldn't actually let baby Grogu die, would be that Din would be faced with the choice of pushing past the boundaries of what compassion will allow, his youngling moment, if you will. However, that will manifest for him, and he makes the choice that it's better to lose baby Grogu than to save him at this price. Then, of course, this is Disney. One of the small acts of compassion that Din has been making will sweep back around. And now, Luke Skywalker in an X-Wing has come back. So, when I originally wrote this script, I actually suggested that Luke Skywalker in an X-Wing might save the day. And he did! So it was a pretty obvious choice on their part. But now baby Grogu has Luke Skywalker in his corner. So, when Din comes to make that choice, we as the audience know what's going to happen. Or we as the audience would know what was going to happen. Proper future tense conditional grammar there. And baby Grogu will be rescued and reunited with Din after Din has made the proper choice. So, take that for what it's worth. My analysis: Din's story is a bright, brilliant mirror to Anakin's. My prediction: Din will not ultimately make the same fatal mistakes that Anakin did. No younglings will die by Din's hand, and no younglings are going to die under his watch. Dang nabbit. So, what do you think, my wonderful viewers? Is Din being set up as a foil to Anakin? Will the creators take the challenge and really force Din to choose between baby Grogu and breaking the laws of true compassion? Will they flake out and sidestep the issue, leaving us to debate it on the sides, with Din going off to adventures on Mandalore and baby Grogu growing up in Luke's Jedi temple? Leave a like below if you think you know what's going to happen, and leave a comment if you disagree. Check out the links below to buy a copy of my heartbreaking book Dying Embers, or my absurdly funny book Humans Are Weird. I have the data. Peace out, my wonderful viewers.